Across 2023 and 2024, one internationally renowned musicians flew their private jet 396 times in 365 days, and around those trips were just 6 minutes long. Figures like this aren't uncommon among the world's richest jet setters. In fact, this frequent flyers probably isn't even the celebrity you're thinking of. So, what's the price tag for this high-flying lifestyle? The majority of private flying happens in the US, where even a relatively short trip is incredibly expensive. If you want to fly private, you have two options: buying a jet or renting one. Jet rentals can run from roughly $7,500 an hour for domestic flights to roughly $17,000 an hour for international ones. For context, that's over $40,000 to fly from LA to New York, and over $120,000 to fly from New York to London. And that's before paying an additional several $1,000s for the crew, fuel, landing fees for the airport, and the federal taxis. That said, these rental costs are still much cheaper than actually buying a plane. Depending on the size, new jets run anywhere from $2 to $65 million. Then, in addition to the usual operational costs for each flight, jet owners still had to pay for a hangar to park in and up to $1 million a year for routine inspection and maintenance. This is already absurdly expensive, but private flying has also a major environmental cost. While both private and commercial planes emit a lot of CO2, commercial planes do so to move a lot of people. For example, in 2022, commercial airplanes emitted roughly 800 megatons of CO2, moving about 853 million passengers. That's a little less than 1 ton of CO2 per person per flight. On average, most people emit 4 tons of CO2 a year, so taking 2 round-trip flights would double the emissions. This math already isn't great, but private jets make it so much worse. With only a handful of people on board, a private flight emits 10 to 20 times more emissions per passenger on average. And since the passengers tend to be frequent flyers, their individual emissions are astronomical. In 2023 alone, the top 10 US private flyers produced more combined emissions than 6,500 people. And for the past few years, roughly 1% of flyers have been responsible for almost half of aviation emissions. This discrepancy is huge. It will likely continue growing as the private aviation industry expands. However, while we probably can't convince celebrities and CEOs to fly commercial, one promising approach for reducing plane emissions is swapping existing jet fuel for sustainable aviation fuels, or SAF. Traditional jet fuel is made from fossil fuels and releases carbon into the atmosphere when burned. SAF, on the other hand, are made from waste material like used cooking oil or renewable crops like corn and algae. These biomaterials still emit carbon when burned, but growing these crops puts enough CO2 out of the atmosphere to offset those emissions by up to 86%. If the entire jet fuel pipelines shifted to SAF, it could reduce aviation emissions by up to 94%. But for this to happen, SAF producers need to overcome two obstacles. First, there aren't enough crops to produce biofuels on a large scale. Researchers are developing synthetic SAFs that don't require crops, but they are still being rolled out. Second, current SAF production is a relatively small scale, which makes it extremely expensive. At 3 times the cost of normal fuel, most airlines won't even consider making the switch. If they did, it would cause airfare to skyrocket. Governments in Singapore, Japan, and most notably the EU have already started programs to support widespread SAP adoption and fund their development. But this is where private flyers could actually help the environment. Most jet owners already spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on private flights. It will only cost them a few thousand more per flight to use synthetic SAFs. This boom in usage would fund both SAF development and large-scale production. And those advances would make sustainable fuel cheaper for everyone, both for the people flying private and those privately wishing they were.